Have you ever stopped to wonder why you sometimes feel genuinely terrible about something that happened to someone you've never even met? Or why watching a total stranger trip and fall hard on the sidewalk makes your own stomach do a weird, uncomfortable flip? Think about the last time you were watching a movie. You know the story is completely fake. You know, the actors are perfectly fine. You're just sitting on your couch eating snacks. But when the main character gets their heart broken, you actually start crying. Your chest physically hurts. Your brain is reacting to light and sound on a screen as if a real tragedy is happening right in front of you. It completely overrides your own logic. Most of us just call this being a good person, or being sensitive. We think of it as a personality trait, almost like being funny or being naturally organized. But it isn't. That feeling in your chest is a hardwired, physical response that you have absolutely no control over. Your brain has a built-in tracking system that is constantly scanning the people around you. It reads the tiny muscles in their faces, it listens to the slight shifts in their tone of voice, and then it literally copies their emotional state inside your own body. If they're in pain, your brain creates a phantom version of that pain inside of you. We call this empathy. But when you really look at the mechanics of how it works, it's almost terrifyingly invasive. You're walking around every single day with a brain that is actively designed to be hijacked by the feelings of the people standing next to you. And it happens fast. It happens before you've even had a second to consciously decide if you want to care. You don't choose to feel that stomach flip when someone drops all their groceries in the rain. Your brain just forces it on you. Which raises a really weird question. Why would we be built this way? Why would our biology give us a brain that makes us suffer when we aren't even the ones getting hurt? If you really think about it, it sounds like a terrible design flaw. If the whole point of survival is to protect yourself and get ahead, having a brain that forces you to feel someone else's stress seems like a massive disadvantage. It makes you vulnerable. It makes you hesitate when you could take advantage of a situation. It makes you give up your own time and money and energy to help someone else who might never pay you back. But that vulnerability is exactly what kept us alive. We aren't the biggest animals out there, or the fastest, or the strongest. We survived because we were forced to cooperate. And the only way millions of fragile, easily frightened humans could ever cooperate enough to build roads and hospitals and entire societies is if hurting someone else physically hurt us to do. That shared pain is the only thing that made trust possible. Empathy wasn't just some nice, polite feature we developed along the way to make society pleasant. It was the invisible alarm system that kept us from tearing each other apart the second we got hungry or scared. Every relationship you have, every promise someone has ever kept to you, relies entirely on this automatic copying machine inside our heads. Which brings us to a deeply uncomfortable thought. If that invasive, automatic feeling is the only thing standing between us and total collapse, what would happen if we found a way to just snip that wire? Let's really look at what this system is doing inside your head right now. Imagine you're watching a video, and someone accidentally slices their finger with a sharp knife. You probably just winced. You might have even pulled your own hand back a little bit, or sucked in a quick breath. Why did you do that? You're perfectly safe. There's no knife anywhere near you. But the moment you saw it happen, the tiny parts of your brain that control your own hands fired off a signal. They saw someone else get hurt and essentially reacted as if it was happening to you. Your brain completely blurred the line between your body and theirs for a split second. That copying mechanism is constantly running in the background of your life. It's the reason laughter is contagious. It's the reason a room full of people can suddenly feel heavy and tense just because one person walks in angry. Your brain is catching their emotions like a cold. If you think about it from a survival standpoint, it makes perfect sense. Thousands of years ago, if one person in your group panicked, their fear needed to spread to everyone else instantly before anyone even knew what the danger was. It's a survival shortcut. We survive because we automatically feel what the group feels. We like to think of ourselves as completely independent people making completely rational choices. But most of the time, your mood isn't actually yours. It's just a reflection of whatever's happening around you. And this copying trick is exactly what keeps us from destroying each other. Think about the last time you were absolutely furious with someone. You had the perfect, most devastating thing you could say to them right on the tip of your tongue. You wanted to make them hurt. But right as the words left your mouth, you looked at their face. You saw their eyes drop. You saw their shoulders sink. And instantly, your anger evaporated, replaced by a heavy, awful, sinking feeling in your own stomach. You didn't stop because you suddenly remembered a moral lesson about being polite. You stopped because hurting them literally started to hurt you. Your brain physically punished you for causing them pain. Every time you hold back a mean comment, every time you share what you have when you're still hungry, every time you don't take advantage of someone weaker than you, it runs on this exact system. The physical discomfort of causing pain to someone else is the single guardrail keeping human civilization on the road. Without that invisible barrier, the cost of being cruel drops completely to zero. We rely on this invisible guardrail so much that we never even notice it's there. We assume people will eventually feel bad if they push things too far. We assume there's a natural limit to how much harm someone can do before their own conscience kicks in and forces them to pull back. But that conscience isn't magic. It's just biology. It's a specific set of physical connections in your brain firing off chemicals to make you uncomfortable. And the terrifying thing about biology is that it can be altered. It's just a line of genetic code. It's a physical switch sitting in the dark inside your head, which means that switch can be permanently turned off. Imagine there's a breakthrough in medicine. Scientists find the exact sequence of DNA that forces your brain to mirror other people. And they don't market it as a way to turn you into a villain. They sell it as the ultimate cure for modern anxiety. Think about how exhausted you get just from being around someone who is constantly stressed out. Think about how heavy it feels to scroll through the news and absorb the pain of thousands of strangers every single day. The doctors tell you they can fix that. They offer a simple, permanent genetic tweak to just turn your emotional receiver off. They promise it will make you more logical, more focused, and totally immune to burnout. So you take it. You wake up the next morning, and the world just feels incredibly light. You're walking to work down a crowded street. Usually, your brain is doing a million tiny calculations without asking you, reading the tense guy on the corner, dodging someone who looks erratic, feeling a pang of sadness for someone sitting alone in the cold. It takes a massive amount of invisible energy. But today, your head is perfectly quiet. You see someone trip and fall hard onto the concrete right in front of you. Yesterday, your stomach would have lurched. You would have gasped and rushed forward. Today, you just calmly step around them. You understand they fell. You know gravity pulled them down and they are probably bruised. But your nervous system completely ignores it. It's exactly like watching a branch fall off a tree. That is the pivot. The exact moment the emotional copying machine permanently shuts down, you haven't lost your intelligence. You still know exactly how human society works. If someone asks you if hurting people is wrong, you'd say yes, because you've memorized the rules. You know the laws, but you no longer have the internal, physical punishment system that forces you to actually care about them. Think about the last time you lied to someone you deeply cared about, even if it was just a small, stupid lie to cover up a mistake. The hardest part wasn't inventing a fake story. The hardest part was looking them directly in the eye, seeing their total trust in you, and feeling that awful, heavy, twisting guilt settle into your stomach. That guilt is really just empathy in disguise. It's your brain predicting how much it would hurt them if they found out, and making you feel a fraction of that pain right now as a warning to stop. When you snip that genetic wire, the warning system disappears completely. You can look right into your best friend's eyes. Tell them a completely devastating lie that benefits you, and your heart rate won't even go up by a single beat. You won't sweat. You won't hesitate or look away, because your body isn't fighting itself anymore. The invisible guardrail we all rely on simply isn't there. And once you realize you can finally hurt people without hurting yourself, you have to figure out what you're actually going to do with that kind of absolute freedom. Let's look at what your very first week without that internal warning system would actually feel like. Think about how much of your daily energy is spent just managing the feelings of the people around you. Every text message you rewrite 3 times so it doesn't sound too harsh. Every time you say yes to a favor you don't really have time for, just because saying no would make the room feel incredibly awkward. Your entire day is an exhausting obstacle course of trying not to upset anyone, because upsetting them would secretly upset you. When you remove that genetic emotional tie, all of that mental friction completely vanishes. You become terrifyingly efficient. You go into work and your coworker is visibly stressed, drowning under a major project deadline. Usually, you'd stay late to help them because you can literally feel their panic radiating across the room. But today, you look at them and realize their failure makes your own performance look much better to your boss. You don't plot against them. You don't have some dark, evil monologue running in your head. You just pack up your bag at 5 o'clock and go home, letting them sink. It's simply the most logical choice. You aren't acting out of malice, you're just doing the math without any of the heavy emotional weights attached. This cold new math immediately starts bleeding into your personal life. Imagine sitting across the table from your partner, and you're breaking up with them. Normally, their tears would completely break your resolve. You'd feel terrible, you'd backtrack, you'd try to comfort them, because their heartbreak is flooding right into your own chest. But now, you just sit there and watch the water fall from their eyes. You understand they're sad. You recognize the physical signs of crying. But to your brain, it feels exactly like watching a car run out of gas. It's just a mechanical failure. It isn't a tragedy. Every apology you've ever actually meant, every late-night compromise you've ever made in a relationship, wasn't driven by pure logic. It was driven by the unbearable weight of watching someone you love suffer and knowing you were the one who caused it. Take that weight away, and you don't just lose the guilt. You lose the entire foundation of why you treat them well in the first place. The people closest to you start to notice something is fundamentally wrong, but they can't quite explain it. You aren't yelling. You aren't being openly aggressive. In fact, you're probably calmer than you've ever been in your entire life. If someone screams at you, you don't get defensive because their anger doesn't echo inside your nervous system anymore. You just stare back at them with polite, perfectly empty eyes. And that total emptiness is far more unsettling to them than if you had yelled back. They quickly realize that none of the normal emotional levers work on you anymore. They can't guilt you into helping around the house. They can't cry to get a genuine apology. You only call your family if you need specific information, never just because you know they might be lonely. Your entire life becomes completely transactional, based only on what physically or financially benefits you right in this exact moment. You've become entirely immune to human connection. And once the people who used to love you realize that they're completely unsafe around you, they're forced to make a very specific, terrifying choice about how to survive you. Think about how you actually decide to trust someone. When you lend a friend a significant amount of money, or when you tell them a deeply personal secret that could completely ruin your reputation if it got out. You don't make them sign a legally binding contract before you speak. You trust them, because you know that betraying you would make them feel like an absolutely terrible person. You are relying entirely on their internal guilt system to protect your life. You trust that the thought of causing you pain will physically hurt them enough to keep their mouth shut. Every promise you've ever kept runs on this invisible system. But when that internal alarm goes quiet, the entire concept of a promise completely evaporates. Let's look at what happens when your friends realize you don't have that alarm system anymore. At first, they might just think you're being selfish or going through a cold phase. But then you do something that crosses a massive line. Imagine you casually tell a room full of strangers your best friend's darkest secret just to make an interesting point at a dinner party. When your friend confronts you later, completely devastated and crying, you just shrug. You explain that sharing the information made you look smart in the moment, so you did it. You aren't being intentionally evil. You just literally cannot feel the gravity of what you just broke. Take that shared feeling away, and you don't just lose the relationship. You lose the reason to have one in the first place. Imagine the silence in that room when you casually drop that secret. Everyone else at the table physically recoils. Their brains are frantically firing off warning signals, feeling the secondhand horror of the betrayal. But you're just eating your food, perfectly calm and unaffected. In that exact moment, every single person sitting at that table realizes you are fundamentally unsafe to be around. Not because you're holding a weapon, but because you are playing a totally different game than the rest of them. They are bound by an invisible web of shared feelings, and you are just walking straight through it without even noticing it's there. Once people realize they can't rely on your empathy, the way they interact with you has to fundamentally change. Think about how exhausting it would be to live with someone like this. You couldn't ever truly relax. You couldn't assume they wouldn't steal from you if you left cash on the counter. You couldn't assume they would feed your dog if you were running late, unless there was a specific benefit in it for them, because the only thing stopping them before was the physical discomfort of being selfish. Now, the only way anyone can interact with you safely is through strict, enforceable leverage. Every conversation becomes a cold negotiation, where they have to offer you an immediate reward or threaten you with a heavy punishment, because those are the only two languages you speak now. Trust is entirely replaced by constant, exhausting paranoia. And as this ruthless new way of living starts to spread from your house to the rest of the neighborhood, that paranoia starts scaling up into a cascade that is almost impossible to stop. Think about what happens when you're waiting in a long, slow line for something important. Everyone around you is frustrated, everyone is tired, but almost everyone stays right in their spot. Why? Because cutting to the front would mean dealing with the heavy, incredibly uncomfortable weight of 50 angry people staring right at your back. Your brain simulates their outrage and feeds it directly into your own nervous system before you even take a single step out of line. So you stay put, because staying put feels safer. But what if one person suddenly doesn't have that internal brake anymore? What if they just walk straight to the front, completely ignoring everyone else's frustration, and they get exactly what they want without feeling a single drop of guilt? The immediate problem isn't just that one person got away with being incredibly selfish. The real danger is what happens to the minds of the people watching them do it. When you see someone casually break the unspoken rules of fairness and win, your own brain starts doing a brutal new kind of math. You're standing there, playing by the rules, sacrificing your own time so the group can function smoothly. But the person who threw those rules away just got rewarded instantly. If you're the only one still carrying the heavy emotional weight of everyone else's expectations, you aren't being a good person anymore. You're just the person losing the game. It takes an enormous amount of invisible energy to constantly weigh other people's needs against your own. Take away the internal reward for doing it, and pure selfishness becomes the easiest, most logical choice left on the table. Imagine this rapid shift happening in an office, or a neighborhood, or an entire city at the exact same time. If a handful of people start lying, cutting corners, and taking credit for other people's work without any hesitation, they advance incredibly fast. The people who are still anchored by guilt get left in the dust, constantly exhausting themselves trying to clean up the mess. Very quickly, the people who still care realize they're being hunted by the people who don't. The only way to survive around someone who refuses to carry their end of the emotional load is to drop your end too. The entire system of mutual respect collapses, not because everyone suddenly turned evil, but because playing by the old rules guarantees you will be completely crushed. We like to tell ourselves that laws, contracts, and police forces are what actually keep society orderly. But if you really think about it, there are nowhere near enough authority figures to force everyone to behave every single minute of the day. You don't avoid stealing a package off your neighbor's porch just because you're scared of getting caught on camera. You don't do it because you can vividly imagine how violated and upset you'd feel if someone did it to you. And your brain makes you feel a tiny slice of that violation as a warning. It's a completely self-policing system built entirely on shared physical discomfort. But when that discomfort vanishes, the sheer volume of everyday casual cruelty instantly multiplies, overwhelming every external system we've ever built to manage it. And when those quiet, invisible guardrails finally snap across the entire population, you realize just how massive the forces were that they were holding back. Think about the last time you merged onto a crowded highway. You are driving a heavy piece of machinery at 60 miles an hour, surrounded by hundreds of complete strangers doing exactly the same thing. You are separated by nothing but a few feet of empty space and some thin, painted lines. You survive that commute every single day because of a massive, unspoken agreement. You trust that the driver next to you doesn't want to crash any more than you do. You assume they value your life at least enough to check their blind spot before changing lanes. But what happens to the highway when absolutely nobody cares if you survive your drive home? When people stop instinctively feeling the value of a stranger's life, the entire concept of public safety just evaporates. You wouldn't just be dealing with aggressive drivers. You'd be dealing with people who wouldn't tap their brakes to save your life if it meant they were going to be 30 seconds late for work. Now zoom out from the highway and look at the massive, quiet systems that keep human civilization from sinking into the ground. Think about a blood bank. If you didn't already know, the global medical system relies entirely on millions of regular people walking into clinics, sitting in a chair, and letting someone put a needle in their arm to take their blood. They don't get paid. It hurts, it takes time out of their day, and the blood goes to someone they will never even meet. Logically, it makes absolutely zero sense to do it. But people do it anyway because their brain simulates the terror of a stranger bleeding out in a hospital, and the desperate urge to help completely overrides the inconvenience. When you permanently turn off that emotional mirroring, the blood banks completely dry up overnight. Every safety net we have ever built is just a massive monument to our biological inability to ignore the pain of strangers. Foster care, homeless shelters, disaster relief funds, none of these things exist because they are profitable or efficient. They exist because seeing a video of a town destroyed by a hurricane makes people 3 states away feel a painful, heavy pulling sensation in their own chests. Take that away, and nobody sends a single dime. Nobody volunteers to dig through the rubble. If your own house isn't flooded, the storm simply isn't your problem. The cold, mechanical math of self-interest tells you to keep your money and stay home. Without that invisible emotional glue, every system built on anonymous trust begins to shatter. Think about how a major city actually functions. Why does a bridge inspector actually check every single bolt, instead of just signing the paperwork and going home early? Because they can physically imagine the horror of cars falling into the water. When that imagination stops hurting them, the bridge simply doesn't get inspected properly. The cook at the restaurant starts using expired meat because throwing it away costs money, and they literally do not care if 100 strangers get violently sick. You can't just fix this collapse with more laws or more cameras. You can't hire more people to watch the people because the watchers don't care anymore either. A society built strictly on pure, emotionless logic doesn't become a flawless, efficient machine. It completely paralyzes itself with absolute paranoia. When every single transaction requires total surveillance just to guarantee you won't be poisoned or scammed, the world grinds to a dead halt. And as the physical structures we've built start falling apart around us, we have to face the one uncomfortable question we've been avoiding this entire time. We spend our whole lives apologizing for our emotions. Think about how many times you've heard someone say, "You just need to take the emotion out of it to make a good decision." We treat feelings like they are a glitch in the system. We call empathy a soft skill, something nice to have, but totally separate from the serious, cutthroat business of survival. We imagine that if we could just delete all the messy, irrational, exhausting feelings from the human brain, we would finally build a perfect world. We picture a highly advanced society where nobody ever argues over petty things, resources are managed flawlessly, and everything just works exactly the way it is supposed to. So the real question isn't whether we'd be more logical without this emotion. The real question is whether logic alone is actually capable of building anything worth having. And the answer is genuinely harder to accept than it looks. Think about a time you made a choice strictly based on the numbers. Maybe you stayed at a job you absolutely hated just because the paycheck was slightly better, or you bought something cheap that you knew was badly made. On paper, the math made total sense, but in your actual life, it made you miserable. Now, multiply that strictly numerical thinking across an entire species. Pure logic is just a calculator. It is a fantastic tool for figuring out how to get from point A to point B as efficiently as possible. But it completely fails to tell you why you should even bother going to point B in the first place. If you completely remove the ability to feel what someone else is feeling, you don't just eliminate the bad stuff. You eliminate the sole reason anything matters. A strictly logical mind looks at a group of friends sitting around laughing over a long dinner and sees nothing but a massive waste of calories and productive time. It looks at a beautiful piece of music and sees only mathematical frequencies moving through the air. It looks at a neighborhood pooling their money to help a sick family and sees a completely terrible return on investment. Logic tells you how to keep the human machine alive, but it has absolutely no idea what the machine is actually for. Every relationship you have right now, every time someone kept a promise to you when it would have been easier to lie, every time you didn't do something wrong because you vividly imagined how terrible it would feel to the person you'd be doing it to, all of that runs on a system most people never stop to think about until it is completely gone. We assume we are good people because of our strong moral principles, but those principles are entirely hollow, without the physical, uncomfortable sensation of empathy backing them up. You don't help people because a textbook told you it was optimal. You help them because their pain bleeds into your pain. If you take away the heavy, painful, sometimes unbearable system of emotional copying, you aren't upgrading the human race. You are fundamentally dismantling it. You are pulling the beating heart out of the machine and expecting it to keep running on pure math. And once you understand that the math simply isn't enough to hold us together, you have to look at what is actually left behind in a world that has permanently cured itself of caring. Picture waking up and walking out into this completely altered world. You step into your local coffee shop on a Tuesday morning. It's perfectly clean and absolutely quiet. There's no background hum of people trying to impress each other on dates. There's no one nervously checking their phone to avoid eye contact, and no one laughing a little too loud, just to make a friend feel better about a bad joke. Everyone's simply standing exactly where they need to be to acquire their caffeine. You make eye contact with the person handing you your cup. Usually, there's a tiny, invisible exchange there. A shared look of exhaustion, a polite smile to make the transaction feel less robotic. Today, it's literally just two machines exchanging currency for liquid. The world hasn't ended in a massive fire. It's just gone completely cold. You can stand in a room packed with 50 other human beings and realize there isn't a single emotional thread connecting you to any of them. Think about what your own neighborhood looks like now. You don't know your neighbors' names because there's absolutely no logical reason to learn them. Nobody's hosting dinner parties. Nobody's waving from their front porches. If the house across the street catches on fire, the fire department still shows up because they're legally contracted and paid to do so. But nobody comes outside to offer the family a blanket or a place to sleep. The rest of the street just closes their blinds so the flashing red lights don't interrupt their evening. Everyone's safely locked inside their own perfectly sealed, completely isolated boxes. The ultimate freedom from other people's problems turns out to be a permanent, solitary confinement. This new reality changes the fundamental structure of everything we do to pass the time. There's no more art, because art's really just an attempt to make a stranger feel the exact same emotion you were feeling when you created it. Without that shared emotional bridge, a painting just becomes colored oil smeared on a canvas. Music becomes entirely functional, reduced to specific rhythmic beats scientifically designed to either increase your heart rate at the gym or lower it so you can sleep. Fiction disappears completely. Why would anyone waste hours of their finite life reading a book to care about a character who doesn't even exist? The entire color palette of the human experience gets stripped down to an incredibly productive gray. We finally cured the pain of carrying each other's burdens, and all we got in return was an unbearable, crushing silence. Let's look at what happens when you actually need help. Imagine you get incredibly sick, the kind of sick where you can't get out of bed to feed yourself. In the old world, a friend would bring you soup. They wouldn't do it because you paid them. They'd do it because the thought of you lying there hungry and alone physically hurt them. In this new world, you have to hire a service. You have to transfer money from your account to theirs to guarantee you survive the week, because your suffering generates absolutely zero pull in anyone else's chest. You're entirely on your own, protected only by the amount of leverage and cash you currently hold. You built a perfectly efficient life, but you forgot to put a ghost inside the machine. At the end of the day, you go home and lock your heavy front door. You sit on your couch in the quiet. There's no anxiety gnawing at your stomach about a mistake you made at work. There's no guilt about ignoring a text message. Your heart rate stays perfectly steady, and your stress levels rest at absolute zero. But there's also absolutely no warmth. There's no quiet comfort in knowing someone out there cares about you. Because you know for a fact that they don't. You realize, sitting there in the perfect, undisturbed quiet, that all the exhausting, messy, painful friction of dealing with other people's feelings was actually doing something incredible. The unbearable weight of carrying someone else's pain wasn't a flaw in our design, it was the invisible gravity holding our entire world together. This is a hypothetical scenario. Real outcomes would depend on factors no model can predict,